Hello and welcome. Thank you for joining today's webinar, Addressing Challenges During an Enterprise Content Management Enrollment. I'm your host, Josh LeClaire, Technical Support Advisor at Logic. I'd like to welcome our guest, Charles Weidman, the founder and CEO of Logic. Thank you for joining us today, Charlie.
Josh, thank you for having me. Happy to be here.
We'll hear from Charlie, and then I'll ask him some questions that were submitted in advance by our audience. If you have a question you would like to ask Charlie, please submit them to info@budalogic.com. Now I'll turn things over to you.
Thank you, Josh. Welcome, everyone. Today's webinar is about some of the larger challenges associated with enrolling the enterprise content management into your enterprise. The four largest roadblocks or challenges involve building a team that will support you throughout the project as well as the enrollment process. The next challenge is the effort that goes into confirming the scope, the difference between what was in the request for quote, what the actual awarded requirements that were presented, and the requirements and design that end up being documented during a discovery session once the award has been made. The other challenges include planning acceptance. How do we get the enterprise to embrace this information and to promote it? And the time commitment and scheduling involved with the entire process. So let's talk about building the team. If you look at this as a project and actually a program, if you think of enterprise content management is not necessarily a project, even though that's typically how they start, it is a program. If your enterprise adopts the paradigm of a program as a leg, let's say, of a table that represents your entity, your enterprise, then you always want to support that leg. It's not a temporary or a project-based implementation. It is part of your organization. So you want a team that represents your organization. That'll include upper management, any project champions, and business owners. Within that, you may, depending on how large your enterprise is, you want to include department managers, business analysts associated with your enterprise, subject matter experts within these departments. For example, you may be enrolling this to the contract or legal department, possibly the accounts payable, HR, a number of different departments. You want to make sure you include subject matter experts from each one of those areas. You also want to include the knowledge workers, people who are doing everything from the filing to processing invoices. These people may or may not embrace change, and you certainly want a sample of those personalities as well as their expertise in contributing to this team. The team is also going to require management to give them the permission to be involved and spend time during this whole process. This can be different periods of the enrollment process and defining what you're going to build so far as a content management system and how you're going to implement requires hours of commitment from these people. Initially, there'll be a lot of time spent discovery meetings. Then you will be involving them in the prototyping and review of the product that you're producing, as well as the actual rollout and implementation of the product, and then eventually training future departments and personnel. Now that you have a team, you need to sit back and you need to confirm the scope before you proceed and start building an enterprise content management solution. There'll be 3 steps involved here. A discovery requirement step that will include the ECM team and typically will produce the following deliverables. You'll have a build to requirements document and a Delta requirements document. The Delta requirements document represents the information and additional details recorded during discovery sessions with the vendor and the ECM team to review the proposed and the awarded requirements with the requirements that were alluded to in some of these high-level proposed requirements. Those deltas can be significant depending on how detailed the initial request for proposal requirements were. So what typically happens is that you will have to examine the delta between the proposed and the build to requirements and determine if you want to increase the budget to support those deltas, or you select to reduce certain functionality to meet the original awarded cost. Once those 2 things have been completed, or if those decisions have been made, the next step would be to go to the discovery design sessions. That would allow you to then, again, the vendor would work with the ECM team. They would take the requirements document and the requirements that you've decided to support or functionality you've decided to drop. And from those meetings, you will end up with a build to design document, a build to project plan, and one of the most important pieces is the project change request process. The project change request process will be something that you will visit throughout this whole enrollment, and it will, as things get built and tested and prototyped, changes will show up, processes that you thought were defined and really clear will be changed and adjusted based on the input you get from the people doing the testing, as well as the subject matter experts and management during this process. So planning acceptance. What are the key pieces that allow you to prime the pump and have this project be embraced by not only the ECM staff and the team that you've built, as well as all the departments and the people that make up the departments? One of the biggest challenges is to put time into your process to reevaluate and commit these the ECM team resources throughout the project. There'll be different times when these resources are needed, from the beginning during the requirements gathering phase and discovery phases, through the prototyping phase where they'll be involved in having input into what the product looks like and how it works, as well as the release and rollout of the product, and how these people will help promote the content management process you've put in place. Along with recommitting those team resources, you need to make sure they have lighter workloads. One of the biggest challenges of being on a team like that is, how do I do my day-to-day work as well as do all the hours associated with helping define and architect this content management solution? With the team resources in a good space, the next largest challenge when it comes to acceptance is starting with departments that are friendly. These departments typically should have established, well-defined processes. These processes should be shared or go across multiple departments. And the staff that make up these departments, the best bet is to have them embrace technology and changes versus push it away. Although it is important to include one or two of those types of people who are resistant to change as part of the ECM team that you put together. The last part of the acceptance, or one of the bigger challenges, is to allow the ECM team and the department or departments involved in the initial rollout process to make changes, to make process changes, including identifying and dropping poor or obsolete processes, and redesigning processes, and giving them the power to do that. Now that we have established some of the groundwork you can do to plan for project acceptance, the last piece of the actual enrollment process is rolling it out and the support that goes with that. One of the biggest conflicts involved with a rollout is providing a schedule that the departments agree to. Oftentimes, the schedule is pushed from management down to say, here are the dates that we will meet. There is no change to that. That causes a lot of friction and can also impact the acceptance of the product as well. So establishing a rollout schedule that has been reviewed by the departments involved and agreed to. That's a huge piece of the rollout support. You also want to make sure you provide those departments, the ones that are, especially the ones that are involved in the initial rollout, with extended training prior to the rollout. And if possible, you include the staff from that as part of the ECM team that you built in the beginning. Those individuals will help promote as well as give a level of comfort during the rollout because they understand and are very familiar with what you've built. They end up becoming the trainers, and you'll find that a number of the problems typically associated with a rollout will be minimized because you have people that are very familiar with the product right there. Questions can be asked and answered, allowing the process to be adapted and embraced more thoroughly. So we've essentially covered a pretty high level the highest level challenges that I've run into doing this for a number of years, and that is the building of the team, confirming the scope, planning acceptance, and the rollout support. Thank you for listening today, and I'm happy to answer any of your questions.
Thank you very much, Charlie. For the Q&A segment of today's webinar, I'll be asking some questions that were submitted in advance by our audience. We would like to encourage participation, so if you have a question for Charlie, please submit them for our next webinar to info@budalogic.com. My first question for you today, Charlie, do you have any suggestions for avoiding delays during an ECM enrollment?
So delays can be caused by a number of things. Specifically, probably some of the biggest delays are funding and scope creep. In other words, if you've got people who, during the discovery process, uncover things that need to be added to the functionality. If you don't have a good process in place to track changes or scope creep, then these things can delay not only your delivery dates, but eventually the rollout of the product.
All right. If an organization is looking to scale back their ECM enrollment to fit within their budget, what features would you designate as non-essential first?
So again, that's pretty subjective, and really what you want to look at is, I guess I'd always come back to the basic functionality is, if I can capture content, I can label it and identify it and put it into my repository so I can retrieve it. Those are your basic functions. If it doesn't do that, then you probably need to expand your scope to include that. If you want automation of the business process on top of it, that would be the next step that I would include. So if you have enough budget to perform the basics, identify the common attributes, the unique attributes, the document types, and how you want to store and retain that information, as well as retrieve it. The next step up would be to provide workflow functionality that allows you to process information within your organization and departments. The other piece I would also consider is how you ingest the information. How are you capturing it? That would be, that almost weighs, that's probably a more significant piece to feed your basic product. So if I have my architecture down, I know the document types I'm capturing, make sure the capture process that allows you to examine what's coming into your enterprise, determine what is actually is content you're going to manage and what you're going to let go of. That would be the other piece that I would make sure you have enough budget in for that functionality.
Our next question, how soon do you predict most organizations will be digital? Do you think that we will ever be 100% paperless?
I would say we're still many years away from being 100% digital. There's some documents that just don't lend themselves to that. However, I would say that as over the next probably 10 to 15 years, you will see, and the trend's already there, you will see less paper generated, just the fact that shipping costs, how do you deliver paper and how do you store it? So those three things are going to drive how quickly we move closer to 100% digital content.
And our last question for today, Do you have any suggestions for executives participating in the requirements meetings?
I have two things that come to mind. One is plan for and budget for the team that puts this product together, as well as is involved in the architecture and functionality design requirements. Provide time for them to do that during their normal work hours. That's a huge piece. Provide enough budget to make sure that the people involved during the rollout process also have been well trained, and that enough subject matter experts and trainers are available, internal trainers, the people that are going to be doing this day to day, have had hands-on experience for weeks before the rollout happens. Those are your two real tender areas when it comes to rolling out a content management or a business automation process solution.
Well, that's it for the questions today. Thank you for your time, Charlie. It's been a pleasure speaking with you. I would also like to thank our audience for your time, and we'll see you next time.
All right. Thank you, Josh. Have a great afternoon.